Welcome, good evening, good afternoon, everyone across the world. My name is CJ Rose, and welcome to Conversations with CJ Rose, the time and what must be done. We're broadcasting live from the UK via MediaNet, linking with our sister company over there, or our sister partners over there in Florida, TC Flex and Flex FM. We are big up the man TC Flex and the Flex FM family. We are bringing true partnership, linking the diaspora, bringing news and views, and unraveling the truth about the current situation in the world, who are we as a people. I've got a very interesting show today, but before I go into that, I always start by making my statement. And I want to just comment about what this whole movement around Black Lives Matter, or this movement around racial inequality. Racial inequality does exist, and it exists and has existed for centuries. But I want to ask the question to the viewers who are listening, and this is something to consider. Are we actually dealing with race? Because it was never meant to be about skin color. The fight that we're in is about heritage, bloodline, and a covenant. So I just want us to think about this and use our critical thinking skills. This is about good over evil and bringing down wickedness and this false ideology that has been built on skin color, perpetuating one skin color over the other. That is not how it was. And this is a system that we must bring down. It's a system of really speaking into injustices that is happening throughout the world. Wickedness perpetuated human beings one to the other, and not necessarily about race. Race has been used as a decoy by the powers that be to divide humanity. And if you've been watching our previous shows, we've gone very deep into our ancient writings to establish who we are as African endemic people. Who are we? How did we end up in this situation? Conquered, enslaved. How did great prophets, great seers, great mathematicians, inventors end up into chattel slavery? Please continue to watch us every Sunday here on MediaNet TV, 5 to 6 p.m. BST time, and on Flex FM live stream at 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But you know, you can log in wherever you are on both channels. As I've said, that we are about truth. Today we've got a really, really important program, and I've got a couple of guests that I want to bring on. Our program is about reclaiming the family and the role of the woman. We're streaming our guest from Liverpool, UK, and I'm going to bring them in a moment. And we've got another guest, and I'll talk about her later, that we're streaming live also from Connecticut, USA. But let me first bring in two amazing people that their video landed in my inbox, and I was just captivated by the light that they brought as a couple. And I was just intrigued to find out how they were able to harness this energy of love as a couple. And this is how the topic, and we've been speaking for weeks about getting them on the show, and we formulated this topic, reclaiming the family and the role of the woman. So without further ado, I've got Seun Senu and Akua too. I'm going to play you the track or the video they sent me that really inspired me to see that this strong African, Edenic, Israelite, Black couple, all the names that we fit under, just had this light and this love. Let me just show you that video.
And
her.
Not her though. I don't speak about my lovely young lady like that. But yeah, Daniel Caesar and her, and we're going to do a version of it. Okay, Senu and Akua too. All right. So hope you like it. Oh, by the way, this dress is a bit mad, isn't it? You show the dress. Oh my God. And look how she's showing off because she knows the dress is absolutely wicked.
It's absolutely beautiful.
And
I love it.
I'm just in the background here with my little things, but you know what I mean? That's all right. That's all right. Let the woman shine, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's all good. Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, we're gonna do this track for you. So I hope you like it and see you soon.
See you soon. Love. Peace.
Okay, so hi again, and yeah, we're going to do this track for you. So hope you enjoy. And don't forget, like and subscribe, and well,
leave a comment.
Leave a comment. I don't know about these things because I'm really old.
No, I'm not.
No, I'm not really old, but I've got the little one over there directing me as to what to say because I ain't got a clue. Okay, yes. So like and subscribe and comment. Thumbs up, thumbs up. Is that what it is?
No, but okay.
No, but okay. You're not nice to me. Anyway.
I'm very nice. I'm just telling you the bad facts that you need to get your fans.
Okay. Anyway, folks. So let's begin. So let's have a 1, 2, 3.
Slowly, it's the sweetest thing, and it don't change. If I had it my way, you will know that you are. You're the coffee that I need in the morning. You're the sunshine in the rain when it's pouring. Won't you give yourself to me? Give it all. I just want to see. I just want to see.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I was really inspired by that track, the family interaction, the love between the man and the woman. And I think we're missing that. So can I just bring in, well, let's fade into Sean Senu and Akua too. Welcome to Conversations with CJ Rose. I'm so excited. And I'm going to ask you to just tell us a little bit about yourself before we bring in our next guest, who was going to join this panel in our conversation. So just tell me a little bit about yourself.
Oh, wow. Well, my name's Akua too. I sing, first and foremost, I'm a mother and a partner to Sean. I'm a singer and a songwriter with Ghanaian descent. Both my parents are from Ghana, but I'm British born. And oh gosh, I'm not sure what else to say. I'm not really good at talking about myself.
So don't worry if you can pass.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah.
Don't worry about it. This is live, everyone. We're running a little bit late. Do excuse us. We do have to go through some technical issues. We've been here from sorting this out. But we like live because what it does, it gives the audience the real feel, the energy, the emotions as it happens. So recorded TV be gone forever, where you can manipulate the truth. You get the truth from us live as it happens. Over to you, Sean Senu.
Okay, Sean Senu. I'm obviously Akua's fiance, soon to be husband. I'm also a father.
Yes.
I'm also a father of two big women now, 25 and 23 years old. I'm a school teacher. I've been teaching for like 29 years now, all around London, and I'm now in the Liverpool area, so I'm teaching there now. teaching mathematics, but I also, my main thrust has been to try and educate young people about who they are, in terms of history, in terms of current, and in terms of spiritually who they are. And so I find ways to include that in my teaching of mathematics, which is very difficult, but that's the main. I think it's a waste of time teaching mathematics if the child doesn't have an understanding of who they are. So I try to incorporate all of that in my teaching.
I like an applied understanding because I wasn't very good at maths in school, but when if anyone knows me, and then we'll go into that later some other time, I've worked in the fashion industry for many years, and I actually started to understand maths when I applied it to pattern cutting and developing clothing. I had to have something visual to apply it to. Thank you for that. I'd like to bring in now, who's going to join our panel, Professor Femi Bogle Asagai from Hartford, Connecticut. Femi is a descendant of Paul Bogle, that great Jamaican freedom fighter, and also the older sister to the legendary Janet Kay from over here in the UK. For anyone that's watching from around the world and in the US, Sister Janet Kay is a goddess of music, a queen of lovers rock, which is a genre of reggae that we founded here in the UK, and that is a strong lineage. Welcome to Conversations with CJ Rose, Professor Femi. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Where does one start? Good afternoon, Carol. Good afternoon to your other guests.
Yes.
Brother Senu and Sister Akua.
Afternoon.
I am of Jamaican descent, having told about Paul Bogle, and I am a direct descendant. We are direct descendants out of Morant Bay. I was raised in England, London, Wembley, Harleston, Kensal Rise, that entire area, you know, all of that. Went to school, all done in London. Institute, I'm an educator. I taught school in England for a number of years and then became an administrator in the Department of Education in Brent, and did significant work in London before coming to the United States in exile. I came to the United States with my husband, Dr. Kuba Asagai, who during that period in England, the 70s and the 80s to the mid 80s, we came here 31 years ago, thereabouts, 1988, we came to the United States. Maggie Thatcher had every intention of taking him out, literally. The Republic of Brent is what she used to call Brent when we were there doing work, because I went back into my community to work. That was important to me. It was significant to me because at the time, there were not too many of us in education, doing education, or in the actual institutions. So I taught school. I worked at Brent BCRC, which was the civil rights agency. I say civil rights because I'm here in the United States, but in England, of course, we say race relations. We call a thing a thing. You know, we don't use euphemisms. They do here in the United States, and it appears that we're picking that up in England also. Having come to the United States, I kept moving within the education sphere, the civil rights sphere, and the political sphere. So right now, I mean, I bring 40 years of education theory practice to the equation and to my life. We're talking about reclaiming the family. I was married for 37 years to the person I spoke about. We have 3 very grown children, and spent our life in struggle, because during the course of my time in education, it occurred to me that there was a need to reclaim our history, to reclaim ourselves as African people or people of African descent. It's interesting that Brother Senu talked about being a mathematician and somehow finding it a challenge to teach mathematics from an African worldview perspective. That's actually not particularly difficult if, in fact, you go on that path of looking at the life of Imhotep, you know, the first multi-genius, going to the Nile Valley, looking and researching. We have a tremendous amount of works right now that will set you on a path to be able to present the history of mathematics to anybody you teach, not just our people, but to anybody you teach. Because the truth is that we're now engaging in intellectual dishonesty, because much of our academic literature and the pantheon of literature and history and so on is based upon white supremacy and lies.
Thank you.
You know, so we're engaged in that process. I think I'll shut up now for a minute and then
I
allow
was
you
No, please don't.
cool.
No, please don't. Wow.
So on one side, she comes from a family of singers, chanters, and another side, freedom fighters. So this sister is full. Thank you, Femi, Professor Femi. Welcome to the show. Now, the topic is reclaiming the family, the role of the woman. And I had to think twice about whether I should use reclaiming the Black family, the role of the Black woman. But I took that out because I want to announce that that doesn't need to be said, because the Black woman is the mother of creation. So therefore, she was the first mother. And the Black man is the father of creation. So they essentially are the first family. So I didn't feel it was necessary to identify the Black family. When we fix it, then the world will fix it. That's how I see it. So, Brother Sean Senio and Akua too, the light that you have, how did you find it? How did you find this spark between you? One comment came up from a sister called Yvonne Michelle. Oh, Yvonne Michelle, hello. She said that your connection is beautiful and the light is beautiful, which is what I saw. Is this your first relationship? Has there been trial and error and now you've connected? Tell us a little bit about the spark that you have.
Okay. If I'm honest, I think it started from the beginning. When we met, first of all, we were both performing at a particular venue, and I went on stage and I sung, and then Akua went on stage and she sung, and a few other people went on stage, and then I went on again, and then Akua went on again. But backstage we met, and at the time, I mean, I was in another relationship at the time. So we talked about the music industry and everything, and we exchanged numbers. We thought if we're gonna do anything with music, maybe if I need someone, a female singer, or if Akua needs a male vocalist, then maybe we could hook up and do something that way. And occasionally we would text each other and say, "How you doing? How's the music going?" However, what happened was when
you text me,
yeah,
and we decided to meet up just for business. Really, it was just for work, wasn't it? To find out who needed work or whatever.
Yeah. By this time, my relationship had finished. Yeah.
And I think we went to Nando's. I think we met at Nando's, and I think we spoke for about 3 hours before we realised we hadn't ordered any food.
Yeah.
Which was a bit crazy. We just talked, we just got on. And it's funny because I think within 15 minutes of meeting Sean, I thought, wow, I'm really scared because I just met my husband.
Wow.
And that was it. It was literally about 15 minutes into the conversation. I thought, you know something? I've gone through a couple of relationships. I've got an idea of what I kind of desire. It's more of a desire, not a want or a need. It's more like a desire in somebody. And what I did before that, I made a list of the kind of qualities I looked for in my ideal partner. And I read those lists to a friend of mine. She said, "Akua, these are realistic desires. They're not things that you can fabricate or things that you dream about. These are real qualities that are actually achievable in a person." And all here, all of them and more are right here. So we spent hours just talking. We closed down, the restaurant closed and we were still talking. We went into a car park to go home. We talked for hours in the car. And we realized that we had lived parallel lives, hadn't we?
Yeah, almost
Yeah.
everything that you've done, I've done at around the same time.
Yeah.
But we didn't know each other. We were doing them in different parts of London.
Yeah.
So probably all
Yeah.
day.
Really
So-
strange.
I have to say
Sorry?
very quickly, Sister Akua, too. I love your glasses. I have to say that. I had to say it.
Oh, thank you.
Coming, loving the style, loving the glasses. That is amazing. What is amazing is that you both were in previous relationships. Brother Seni, you were in a previous relationship. You spoke to me when we were talking about this show to say that you were married before, perhaps, and you know, it just didn't work, and you didn't give up, but you continued to build your qualities, I would imagine, because people make mistakes. You know, this topic I think is very, very important because we know both here and in the US and wherever you find us around the world that the original family, the family of the original people of the earth is more or so headed by the woman. There is an absentee of our men for various different reasons. And I know I'm going to bring in Professor Femi Bogle to talk about that from statistical perspectives, etc. And so we know that there's been a lot of talk about, not talk, for the time that I've been alive, we talk about the legacy of slavery, the plantation ghost, you know, that divided the man and the woman and totally broke down black affection or affection between our men and women. And it's played out in our DNA to date. So we have an issue there. How did that work? How did you reclaim Sean Senu to become the light for Akua too? Because she says that you fulfilled all her desires.
How did you do that? That's fine. How did you think you did that? I mean,
How do I think I did that? That's a very difficult question to answer. Sorry?
Was it a spiritual insight that you had to go on? Did you have to go on a journey of self to become that light?
I think if I'm honest, my whole life really has been about discovering who I am on a much deeper level. When I was younger, I wanted to be able to. I wanted a high level of education, but at the same time, I wanted to develop my physique. At the same time, I wanted to develop my spiritual. It's like almost the whole being. I've always been driven by that, and so I took up bodybuilding when I was in my teens. Even before when I was before 10, even in primary school, I was doing the bull work and press ups and stuff. I was just interested in self development in all different ways. So I think that how that would translate to a relationship, to all the relationships that I had before, where I was trying to be somebody that is this concept that when we're young, okay, we're young, and but then we get to a point where we have to get ready to be able to produce a foundation upon which
you did a lot of holistic work. You did a lot of holistic work on yourself.
Absolutely. So that I could produce that platform that a partner could come and we could build something together that could then pave the way for younger people to come up, whether they're our own younger people or whether they're children from other parents, but to create that platform. And I mean I think that requires a certain level of maturity. So we can't be children anymore. I think a lot of men miss that, and they want to be playing around still when we reach a point where we have to be building. And that's our responsibility, I feel.
I like that. Professor Femi Bogle Asagai, you were married for 37 years.
I was.
I know of the late Kuba Asagai. He was a strong man. Picking up on what the brother has said about taking responsibility, he had to come to that realization in himself after a failed marriage that he needed to build foundation for something, for himself, for children, for a legacy. It is said that our men play around. Our men do not take relationships seriously. They do not understand the role of their role in the house, in the household, or as a helpmeet for the woman, or the strength for the woman. Could you comment on that from a personal perspective and from an academic perspective?
Let's take a step back and do this from, let's say, my personal experience first and foremost. I think it's important to put context to our conversation about our relationships as people of African ancestry. We have got to recognize that we must rebuild that which was taken away from us, as you quite rightly pointed out, the original parents, so the original man and woman. And we are now building relationships absent recognizing the psychological, emotional, spiritual pressure that we exist in and under, not to mention that being compounded by the economic, social, and political realities that we exist in as diasporan Africans, people who are living in the West. So we're trying to have loving, caring, emotional, spiritual relationships under the umbrella, if you will, or within the oven of racism, white supremacy, colonialism, imperialism, and all of those isms, if you will. And one of the things that does not happen with us is that we, more often than not, do not address those issues inside of our households, because it takes a high level of consciousness of self to address those particular issues in such a way that we're able to translate them within our families to make it real for our children as we raise our children within a racist environment. Now, why is that important? It is important because we have taken on a Judeo-Christian reality and taken on the values out of the Judeo-Christian reality and treat those values as though they're our own. So we subscribe to all things biblical without understanding the Bible. We subscribe to all things European and Eurocentric without understanding that all of that information, all of those values are there to project the well-being of people of European ancestry, because they have constructed a reality that places themselves at the top. And so what you have inside of our households is a whole lot of confusion. Why do I call it confusion? Because when you're not in one accord about the reality in which you live, the children are in place A, the parents are in place B. If you have animals, they're somewhere else. You know, you go to church along with your parents until you cannot go anymore, then you stop going. Usually the man is not going to church because he doesn't want to listen to the nonsense about a white Jesus or a white God. So I say all that to say that until we confront the damage that has occurred to us as a people, and women in particular, it is important for us. I was interested to hear Sister Akua say that she had some desires that she was able to identify for herself personally, so that when she met the man who inhibits all of those desires, then she was able to identify him very quickly. With all of that, it is important to understand that because of the legacy of the slave mode upon our people, our men are not ready to be engaged in any real or true relationship before the age of 30 or 35. And that goes to what Brother Sean said. Because there's a level of maturity that is required to get to a place where you understand what it means to stand and protect and defend your family. absent having guns or ammunition to do so. There's a sense of responsibility that comes with that, which if you don't know it, do not understand it, and yourself feeling vulnerable, you're not going to be able to do it. And so I'm also saying that there's a level of dishonesty that occurs in relationships that we have with each other, because the men are feeling a certain kind of way, knowing that they can't really be the man, because the actual man is the white man. So when we talk about the man or men, we're talking about the white man. When we talk about black men, we call them males. Why are we calling them males? Because we're talking about everything below the belt. A man is all the embodiment of the person. So in saying that, I'm saying we need to stop calling our men males,
So
because we go specifically to their sexuality, which again is a legacy of the slave mode, versus to the totality of who they are. There was so much said by Sean and the a moment ago that we could just pick on and
so
speak to what they said.
you mentioned earlier about the Bible, and if anyone's been following these shows, last week and the week prior, we had on Professor Theron Williams, who has written a book called The Bible is Black History. And he has basically, through lots of research, DNA research, historical data, proven that the Bible is our history. However, our understanding of the stories has been given to us by a Romanic Catholic or Christian doctrine or understanding. So therefore, we cannot see ourselves or our culture, our true culture in the book, because it's almost like we have blinkers on. First and foremost, the savior of the world has been misrepresented as a white man with blonde hair, blue eyes, savior of the world. And in fact, he was not and is not a person of European facial or characteristics. So what does that do to the psychology of a race of people who are very spiritual and very much in love with the Creator? But isn't it for years we have been talking about white supremacy, that doctrine partake, in playing on our minds. Is it not now time, with all the books that have been written, the conversations that have been had? This is not the first time that I've had to have this conversation, even in my own life, in my own walk of awakening to my history. I'm still doing that walk of spiritual awakening, because it's a lifelong journey. But the awakening to my history, we have talked about this. Is it not now our time to start to do the awakening ourselves and taking ownership, brothers in particular? Is it not time for you to recognize that you are the head of the family, and therefore it is your role to protect the woman and her children? Is that not the time? Isn't it not that we should be discussing at this time, almost starting from base level? Around this whole COVID-19, Black Lives Matter, it's all about racism, economics, but why don't we start at the foundation? I'll leave that to anyone who wants to jump in, because I'm like you, Femi. I've got a lot to say, Professor Femi.
I think that leads to the question of our spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
And again, Brother Sean talked about his journey, which is so important and so critical. I was wife number 3 for my husband, right? And we spent 37 years together. So obviously he got it wrong twice over and admitted to that. But the spiritual awakening is absolutely necessary and critical for us, because it is by coming to terms with who we are internally, not what our skin color is, because that's not the struggle. It is about identifying your soul, your very spirit, and coming into the understanding of the history and the culture of your people. And by the way, there's no perfect people anywhere.
Absolutely.
And African people are not homogeneous in terms of our culture. All right? We have an overarching set of values that we can all subscribe to. Yes, we do love the Creator. Yes, we're a lover of humanity because we're human beings. And just because you're a human being, it doesn't mean that you know how to be human. But
So-
we as African women, because, you know, our role is significant in the whole equation, because our men are going to trip up and they're going to fall down. But to what extent do we help, if you will, in their process? And to
So,
what extent do they help in our process? What I'm saying is we need to know who is against us, who are enemies.
so can I, we've lost you there, Professor Femi. Just to reiterate the topic,
To
the topic,
do that,
the topic of today's show is reclaiming the relationship, the role of the woman. And just picking up on something you said, Professor Femi, is that if the man falls down, it's the woman's responsibility to pick him up. Now, our brothers have been falling down quite a lot, I would say. Please, I don't, attack me if you will. And this is not to berate our brothers, because we love you. We're having family discussion here, and this is not to berate anyone. It's just to talk about relationships from a non-sexual perspective, but from a spiritual perspective and a perspective of ownership. And you said something, Femi, that in our nature as reflections of the Most High, the Creator, is the love of the Creator. And the image of the Creator is love. So why is it so difficult for the original man and the original woman to really find true balance and true love that surpasses every obstacle in their relationships? There are too many broken relationships in our community. Sister Akua,
Yes.
what do you think that is, and what is the role of the woman? What is her role to help the man find himself and stay in a prolonged relationship? How has it been for you?
I can only speak on obviously from my personal experience. I was in 2 relationships before this amazing man right here. And what I found was I took on too much of a role, the role of the man in the 2 previous relationships I was in. So I wasn't really the woman that I was screaming out to be. And what I got from those 2 relationships was that the men that I was actually with, they didn't know who they were. They didn't take time to learn from their previous mistakes, and grow from that. You know, I say they're life lessons, because with life lessons, when you've learned your life lesson, I feel then you're able to move on to the next level of your evolution as a human being. So what I learned was that these 2 relationships that I had, the men would repeat the mistakes they made and not learn from them, despite being alerted to their mistakes. I could see what was going on, but they didn't want to listen. The ego came in, like, who are you to tell me? But I'm saying, I'm not telling you, I'm just trying to, I'm observing the lesson that I feel that you need to focus on more in order to move on.
So do you think, sorry to interrupt, do you think that perhaps, because you said that you felt you were seeing the same patterns repeated in your own relationships where the men hadn't learned from their mistakes, do you think that could be that they say we reflect who we are? You said you had to find your womanhood, your femininity, your wisdom. So for anyone who doesn't know, we talk about in our community the Holy Spirit or the Ruach. That spirit is feminine. The wisdom the world lives by is a feminine energy, it's a feminine spirit. Don't take it from me, do your research. But anyway, is it that you needed to find more of your feminine self? Because I identify with you.
Yes.
That we can sometimes be the man in the relationship because we've watched our mothers.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
and sometimes that is quite scary to a man. You know, a man
Yeah.
is in touch with himself or is trying to be in touch with himself.
Yes. Yeah.
Because, or is there a pattern here of men being somewhat silenced by our strong masculine self? Is that something that you think was going on in your relationship, perhaps?
I think what it was, I didn't want to be the man, but it was almost like they didn't want to take responsibility. Like Sean was saying, the responsibility of looking after the woman. So when I tried to be a woman, it was almost like it seemed like a bit of a threat. It's hard for me to explain it without, which is why I felt I had to sort of try and keep the family together, so to speak. I felt that was my role in those other relationships that I was in. And then the lack of communication in those relationships to resolve the issues that were coming up as a result of the situations that we found ourselves in. I found that they tended to lie. There was a lot of lies and deceit on their side, which obviously changed the energy in the relationships that I was in. But when I met Sean, I felt like I could. It was difficult for a while, wasn't it? Because he said, "Look, Aquia, I'm here now. You don't have to be the man." And because I've done it for so many years, being a single parent looking after a child, you know, that had challenges in themselves. I had to take over the household, the bills, all that kind of thing. I didn't want to do that. But then when Sean came along, he said, "Look, Aquia, you can let go of that because I'm here now." And so that to me was the greatest thing in the world, to actually be given the go ahead just to be what I've always wanted to be, which is the woman in the relationship. So a lot more peace was restored within my spirit. And again, Sean felt like he could be himself, which was the male role model in our relationship. So yeah.
So amazing. You know, I'm finding this topic quite difficult actually, because it's a big one. And as you're speaking, I reflect. I'm a divorced woman, and I'm reflecting on my own relationship and some of the things that you're saying in that struggle to bring the man up, so you can be the woman. I was the career person in my relationship, my marriage, and it's where I was. And when I, married my husband, I was the career person still. And I used to want to be, I used to want to work 3 days a week, but I had to bring in my half. So it was very difficult being wanting to be a woman and have my career. I wasn't allowed to be the woman, put it that way. And so therefore, when I became a strong career woman, which was brought into the relationship, there was a threat. And I think what you have picked up on or expressed quite nicely is that the brother who from what your own expressions, Sean, is that you did a lot of work on yourself to reflect about what you wanted in a relationship and how it should be, so you could accommodate the right energy, the female energy, when it came along. Would that be correct? We've lost Professor Femi. Is that asking production? We've lost Professor Femi. I hope we can get her back in again. We lost her. Hopefully she'll tap in again, and we'll bring her into the conversation. I just feel there's a lot to uncover and we don't have enough time. So we will be doing a part 2 because this is very, very important. Somebody said she wished she could comment. Go ahead, Deborah Chase. Wish you could comment. If do make a comment, and if I get it in time, I will read that out. But just back to you, Brother Sean. You had done a lot of work to be able to accommodate what that sister needed to be taken care of, so she could be her feminine self. That is important, because what I'm hearing here is, which is correct, is that there were 2 defined energies that had to identify themselves, and the 2 came together. One feminine, one masculine. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Spot on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
See, the thing is, I think the way that I've I've always viewed things as that, okay, people say, oh, I want this in a partner, I want that in a partner. But then the reality is, if that was to come through, a lot of people wouldn't necessarily be able to make that work because they haven't developed themselves to the point where they could actually supplement that in a way that that union would work. So I think that's, you know when you say what you wish for?
Watch what you wish for.
What you wish for, yeah, because it might come. And when it comes, if you haven't done your work on yourself,
Correct.
then that will come and it will go, because you won't have developed what you need to hold on to it. And I think that there needs to be more emphasis on self-development than looking outward at the other person and saying, you are this, you are that, you need to sort this out. It's about, well, hold on, if I sort this out within me, maybe you will be able to join with that, you know, and then we'll be able to walk together, you know. But I think a lot needs to be placed on self, you know, to make things work. And I think if both people do that, then we're going to get a very harmonious situation. And I think we both do that.
I like
Yeah.
that. I like that because it is about being your best self in a relationship. And we've made this mistake. We look to the other person to grow. Well, he's doing this, he's doing that. Really, the role is, I would say, about being your best self. It's about that whole thing about love, being forbearing, and it covers a multitude of sins. It really is about basically being the strong person for that person. It's about two energies coming together. The other person,
Absolutely.
you become their strength. Yvonne Michelle has asked for a part 2. I think we definitely need a part 2. We cannot break this down in an hour because there's so much to cover. We've got Professor Femi Bogle back online. What is the importance of prayer or spiritual connectedness in a relationship? We've heard the saying, a family that prays together stays together. I'm very much a believer in prayer and meditation. Professor Femi, is there importance of the two praying together or connecting spiritually or spending time aside together for spiritual union, connecting with your God or your higher force, your Yah? Is that important in a relationship? Did you hear me? Professor Femi, did you hear me? Can you hear me, Professor Femi? Professor Femi?
Oh, there's
Mike? She can't hear. We're going to fix your mic. Let me direct. We're going to fix your mic. Let me direct the question to Sean and Akua too about praying together.
Yes.
Yeah.
We do, don't we? We meditate.
Yes, we do. Definitely.
Yeah. We always pray before we eat at the dinner table. And we also try to pray each morning as one of the first things that we do to kick the day off. And that basically sets us on a path where we are not only in a peaceful mode, but we're also in a mode that's in unison with each other as the first thing that we do. And then whatever we do throughout the day, that has been our grounding, you know. So.
And we use the Metanatera as well.
Absolutely.
Before the deities, and we read the deities before, just to make sure that we incorporate what we have in our own personal lives with the deity of that reading, and then we'll meditate on that deity to set us up for the day.
Yeah.
And
when you say deity, you're talking about a characteristic rather than the Most High. Am I correct?
Absolutely. Yes.
Because you believe in the Most High, but you look at personalities and what that's going to be for your day. Is that correct?
Yes. The Most High is a very big thing to meditate on. So I think what we do is to look at specific areas that we can deal with in the course of our meditation, and focus on those areas, and then relate those areas to the different aspects of our lives. And then tomorrow will be a different aspect, and so on and so forth. And that way we're getting through all the different areas within ourselves and within the Creator, of course, which is one of the same, according to what we believe, So God here, God out there, all the same thing. Yeah. And so I think it's very important that we see self and we see each other as that element of the Supreme Being. I think that seriously impacts on how we relate to each other if we can see each other in that way,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know if Professor Femi is back in. Can you hear me, Professor Femi? We're communicating here. We've lost sound on her mic production. Is there any way we can get Professor Femi's mic back on, because she cannot hear us? I think that's a very important point that you make, that not only is the Most High, the presence of the Most High around you, but you've identified the presence of the Most High within yourself. And every day you wake up, you try to meditate on reaching those points within yourself, or that characteristic within yourself. That is very, very important, because we have lost the understanding of that. We're looking for an energy, an external energy, and the external energy is in operation every day, because when we wake up, we breathe in, right? So that is, and we talk, we walk. That is his presence operating on the outward. But how do we attain his truth or her truth on the inward side? It is through meditation. It is through prayer. It is through self-reflection.
Most definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the motivating force to what we do.
How do you deal with disputes?
So that we can tune in.
Sorry?
How do you deal with disputes? If you
How
have
do we deal with
disputes?
every relationship, whether it's a physical relationship or whether it's two friends, business relationships, there's always disputes. But within your marriage, because marriage isn't necessarily a piece of paper given to us by the state. It's an acknowledgement and a union that you are in. How do you deal with disputes?
I think, again, how we see each other is really important, because whatever I'm saying to Akria, whatever Akria is saying to me, if we are both aware that you are Akria and you're saying what you're saying to me as Akria, and I'm going to say whatever I'm saying to you as Sean, and everything that you know about Sean, everything I know about Akria, then we will be able to take those things in the correct way. Now, if there is a difference of opinion, then we will be able to maintain the respect for each other and the love for each other throughout that. And that will help us to be able to come to a common ground in the end. As long as, I think what often causes people to tumble, I think, is where people say something and the other person takes it personally. And all of a sudden, they start relating to that person as if they're not the person that they've known for this time. And all of a sudden, oh, you said that, and I'm taking that to mean this. But there's a forgetting of, hold on, but you are who you are, and everything I know about you has to come into play when I'm interpreting something that you're saying. And it's not always easy.
Yeah, I think what I felt from both of you is that you spend a lot of time introspecting, a lot of time building each other up, purely because you've done a lot of work on yourself. I think that's very, very important in this conversation about, if you've just joined us, reclaiming the relationship, the role of, or reclaiming the family, the role of the woman. We've got Professor Femi back online. Can you hear me, Femi? Can you hear me, Professor Femi?
I can, yes.
Thank you. Before we lost you,
I can, yes.
Thank you. One of the questions I asked, and I wanted to bring to you, because I know you're very much into your ancient heritage and this importance of families or partners meditating and praying together. How important was that in our ancient traditions? The prayer and that spiritual connectivity.
Paramount. It was paramount. It was absolutely paramount. Very, very important. And it is one of the things that clearly, from my perspective, we need to return to, or one of the practices we need to return to. You know, one of the things we do a lot, of course, is that we pray because, again, we're in the Judeo-Christian tradition. But what we need to understand about prayer is that you're actually speaking to your ancestors. And when we pray and meditate within the construct of the Judeo-Christian tradition, what we're doing is we're calling on the ancestors of our oppressors. It sounds terrible, but that's actually what we're doing. You know, when we're calling out the name and the names of all of the various Jesuses, if you will, we're calling other people's ancestors. If in your life those people are not prepared to allow you to breathe, to use the vernacular that is currently being used, why would we think that they would come to our sides, come to our rescue, come to our support in our time of need? So we have to make that connection. We live in this disconnect, in a state of pain, emotional and psychic pain. I absolutely love listening to Sean and Nicole because they're so spiritually tight. You know, you have the mix, if you will, the mix to, if you're raising young Black children, that's important, because what I'm finding now is that having raised our children within that framework of consciousness about self as Africans, and having given them names to which they can identify and with which they can identify, now as adults in their 30s, they are extremely confident, young people, feeling very firm on the ground. They are not preoccupied with what white people are thinking, what white people are doing, what white people want. They just have not got that interest. That is not where they are. Their focus is on what we do for self. What can I do in order to advance the well-being of my own people? That's a different mindset. That's having a mindset that puts you at the center of your world.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, we used to do things like meditate and pray in the car, you know, and we'd say it aloud. And even if the children are not saying it, my husband and I would say the prayers, you know, but you're calling on your own ancestors to come and be in your midst.
And that is a
And
very
that gives you a different sense of self, a different set of confidence, and let me say power as you move around.
so some important points. We've got 5 minutes to go. We're going to do part 2 next week. Does everybody agree? I'm going to put you on the spot. Is everyone agreeing to that?
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely fine. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, you know, you say, and you're quite right, Professor Femi, about connecting to self, understanding. I'm sweating here. I'm seeing myself on the big screen. It's really hot with all the lights, so forgive all of that. If we are to identify who we are and to go to the right source, and let me just quote you from the Book of Chronicles. The Most High said, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sin and I will heal their land. That is a specific declaration from our ancestor, the Most High, because we are the children of the book. We are the chosen people of the Most High. And we will get it. We've been uncovering this throughout our shows, our topics. And this is not to perpetuate skin color, because as I said earlier, it's not about skin color. It's about heritage. It's about bloodline. And that bloodline doesn't, as you trace it, it's not necessarily a black bloodline if it's about, or black skin color if it's about heritage. So prayer is essential. And we've identified that. And also identifying who we are against the Eurocentric narrative of the scriptures that has impacted our brains, our psychology, chattel Holocaust to post-chattel Holocaust? How do we now start to claim back our unity to our ancestors? And I'm always going to come from a scriptural perspective. I'm always, as a Hebrew, awakened Hebrew, a member of the African Edenic race. I'm always going to come, when I'm going to say lineage, actually, let me correct myself. I'm always going to come from a scriptural perspective. And let me also say that we've grown up with 66 books of the scriptures. There were over 200 books of our ancient writings, and then some. And they have been put out of place, miscommunicated, thrown away, burnt, whatever. With what we know now, this is really about love and justice for humanity. How do we claim that love for self? First individually, then between the man and the woman. Professor Femi.
Carol, first of all, let me say that you're right about lineage, but what is absolutely important is to know where we are placed in that lineage. That is absolutely critical. The other thing is, because the word Holocaust has such a visceral connection to the Jewish people, one of the things we've done, and I think it's important that we do this, is that we use the word Mahafa, the Great Destruction. All right? Professor Sister Marimba Ani tells us exactly what that word means in her book, Yurugu, which I think is probably out of print, but you can still get it if you have really good connections to the Black bookstore movement. And definitely, without a doubt, it is exciting to my mind to be a person of African ancestry. Why? Because there's so much to learn. There's so much to learn. And in the advent of the internet, there is a tremendous amount to learn. Because we can now connect with our family across the planet, literally, not just on the continent, but in Southeast Asia, in South America, across the globe. There is so much to learn. But we have to understand that our history is the history of the original people. We are the original people, and we have got to learn that information. So we must research, reclaim, and reconnect ourselves to our history in such a way that we can stand in our power. We can understand our role as women, and we can understand our role as men, and we can understand our role as the family of humanity. It is an absolute necessity and a must. And this is why I focus my life on that work. It is important to me because I know that what we have out here calling education and the transmission of knowledge is in fact intellectual dishonesty and the perpetuation of Eurocentric lies. I refuse to do that.
Hallelujah.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Our brother Senu, Hines, or Sean Senu, and Akua too. Do you teach your children? You have children grown up and probably young ones. We heard you being directed on your video earlier, probably by one of your young children. How do you teach them what Femi is talking about, this wealth of knowledge to bring back to self? Now, we've been doing this for some years, but we've not gotten anywhere, really, have we? Because in 2020, we're seeing demonstrations or the killing or the brutal slaying of our men, very similar to the Rodney King incident over 25 years ago, right? So with all the knowledge that we have been teaching ourselves, we've got in this country a lot of black on black knife crime with young black men, and certainly in the States. Are we actually teaching ourselves the right knowledge? And, you know, when I open the show, I always say this is the knowledge that will set the whole world free, because our sisters and brothers, and I hate to use the term white, Caucasian people, this is not to berate. This is knowledge that you also need for yourself. Because if you understand who we are, you will understand who you are and where the advent of racism comes from. Hating someone based on the color of their skin when it wasn't really about that. So I know my questions can be long and complex, but to Senu Sean, to Senu Hines, you know, and Akua too, do you teach your children their heritage? Do you pray with your children, and how important is that?
Well, what we've decided to do is, I mean, the youngest child that you heard on the video that we played, the music video, she's in the top 50 best grammar schools in the UK. And that school is predominantly white. So what I've said to her is that, and what she does do is that I said to her that what you do is you start with yourself, her, you know, from Africa, you start with Ghana, you research the people, the tradition, the music, the food, the culture, and you go from Ghana, you go right across the top of our continent, all the way through. That is something that you must do every single month. Go from country to country about the history of that country, the people, what they stood for, and therefore, and by doing that, it gives her that rich background that I know for a fact that the white school that she's in won't teach her. Educationally wise, she's getting the top education, but in terms of her spiritual heritage, that's something that we've put upon her that she must incorporate in her everyday life, so she doesn't lose touch with where she's from and who she is. And again, we have the Black History books. We've got a whole library of Black History books that I've been collecting for 30 years. So she's got a whole library of books that I can't get anymore because they're like out of print, or they're £200-300 in terms of, you know, money. So it's purposely done so we cannot buy these books. We can't afford to spend £60-70 on a book. But fortunately, I've had books from like 30 years about our heritage. So I say to her, make sure that you go through a whole continent, write down who the people are, what language they spoke, what the food they eat, the whole thing, and that way she stays in touch with her spiritual ancestors. Yeah.
And that leads me to just make the point that one of the questions we wanted to ask was, is the woman the first teacher? And she is, evidently. We're running out of time. I'm going to say thank you to each of you, Professor Femi Bogle, Sean Senu, Akua too. I'm going to cut it off. I'll be thrown out because there are other people coming on after us. Thank you to Conversation with CJ Rose. We're going to do part 2 next week. Thumbs up.
Fantastic.
A lot of requests for that. If we can, I hope we can lead out with your video. I'm not sure if it's queued up, but just thank you to our viewers. Please, if you know wherever you're watching from around the world, Africa, the Caribbean, the UK, Brazil, share this information. Tune in again next week to Conversations with CJ Rose, The Time and What Must Be Done, where we're going to go into part 2 of reclaiming the family, the role of the woman, and indeed, what is the role of the man. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And nice to meet you, Steve, as well.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good to have you. Thank you.
Okay, Femi.
See you next week.
Yes,
See you
good
next
night.
week.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Love and peace.
Love and peace.
Yeah, Dynasties on her, and we're going to do a version of it, okay? Senu and Akua too. All right, so hope you like it. Oh, well,
Yeah.
isn't it? Oh my God. Because you know the dress is absolutely wicked.
It's absolutely beautiful.
And
I love it.
I'm just in the background here with my little things, but you know what I mean? That's all right. That's all right. I want to shine, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's all good. Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, we're going to do this track for you. So hope you like it, and see you soon.
See you soon. Love and peace.
Hi again. And yeah, we're going to do this track for you. So hope you enjoy. And don't forget, like and subscribe. And, well,
Leave a comment.
leave a comment. I don't know about these things because I'm really old. No, I'm not really. But I've got the little one in there directing me. I ain't got a clue. Okay, yes. Like and subscribe and comment. Thumbs up, thumbs up. Is that what it is?
No, but okay.
No, but okay. You're not.
To get your fans.
Okay.
I know.
So, begin. So let's have a 1, 2, 3.
You don't know, babe, when you hold me, it's the sweetest thing, and it don't change. If I had it my way, you will know that you are. You're the coffee that I need in the morning. You're the sunshine in the rain when it's pouring. Won't you give yourself to me? Give it all. I just wanna see. I just wanna see how beautiful you are. You know that I see it. You know you're a star. Where you go, I'll follow. No matter how far. If life is a movie, then you're the best part. You're the best part.
It's the sunshine and those brown eyes is the wonder I desire. When we wake up and when we make love, it makes me feel so nice. You're the water that I need in the desert. You're the Tylenol I take when my head hurts. You're the sunshine of my life. I just want to see how beautiful you are. You know that I see it. You know you're a star. Where you go, I'll follow. No matter how far. If life is a movie, then you're the best part. Oh, you're the best part. Best part. If you love me, won't you say something? If you love me, won't you? If you love me, won't you say something? If you love me, won't you? Love me, won't you? If you love me, won't you say something? If you love me, won't you? If you love me, won't you say something? If you love me, won't you? Love me, won't you? If you love me, won't you say something? If you love me, won't you? If you love me, won't you say something? If you love me, won't you? Love me, won't you?